Hello again, Bill Pfeiffer speaking from Mary's Field. I'd like to spend a little bit of time today dealing with the debate that's going back and forth in our culture about Mr. Biden, his Catholicity in the Catholic Church, and so on. Good for us, even before we begin this, to remember that each of us is pre-programmed emotionally to hear what we want to hear and to reject what we want to reject. That's just the case for all of us. You know, we know the things we don't want to accept, and we just don't accept them, and so on. So what I ask today is kind of an open mind, an open heart. In dealing with the whole question of abortion, Cindy, my wife, and I have been involved in this question and debate, if you will, in our culture for the last 58 years. Cindy would go to Harrisburg. She was a part of Pennsylvanians for Human Life, would go into the high schools and speak in the public high schools, if you can imagine, talking about abortion and so on. She would write letters for her college newspaper. She went to Washington to the Lincoln Monument there in pro-life programs and so on. So we've been involved for a long, long time. This isn't something new to us. And I want to say, too, that we're doing this out of love, out of care. Mr. Biden is my brother, and I have a right, and he has a right to have me treat him as such. And as I've mentioned before, Cindy, my wife, and I, we pray for all of the 13 immediate members of our family. Every morning after breakfast, we say a rosary for each one of them. That's about 13 people. Then we say one for Mary, one for the poor souls, and then one for whoever's president. So we've been praying for Mr. Biden. So I'm not here to take pot shots at politicians and so on. The people, the thing that I see on Twitter is, the church ought to stay out of politics. Well, the church should never get involved in partisan politics, but when politicians say things that are morally incorrect, or as they do so often say things that really are contrary to basic morality, they need to be challenged on that. The situation happened with Pope Francis in Italy a couple of years ago. One of the trade unions was having some difficulty, and Francis chimed in on it, and they got very upset, the union did, and said, you mind your own business, your business, take care of church. But Francis said, you're dealing with my people. These are people who get hungry. These are people who need clothes and housing and have souls and spirits. That's my job. And so it is with government and its situation as well. It's not the church getting involved in politics. It's the church getting involved with, not so much who said it, but what they said. And that's a legitimate thing. In fact, it's absolutely a sacred responsibility to do that. Not to, the church would be doing the society and the government a real, genuine disservice. The separation of church and state was meant not to protect the state from the church, but the other way around, to protect the church from the state. And that certainly isn't happening in our culture right now. Everybody and anybody feels free to take pot shots at the church and so on. So I see people saying that again. Just stay out of politics. That's just you can't defend that. That has no defense at all. And the people that are saying that have little knowledge of religion at all. In our culture in general, isn't it true? People have bachelor's degrees and master's degrees and PhDs and this and that and the other thing, but a 6th or 7th or 8th grade graduation course, if you will, in religion. And it doesn't make any sense. But that's really what happens. You can't imagine someone with a 6th grade knowledge of quantum physics, comparing himself or herself with a PhD in quantum physics. There's a lot of things. The person who's read one chapter on quantum physics finds out there's a whole book on it, and that's the same with religion. We have people sometimes with 6th and 7th grade relationships with religion who are speaking about things that are far beyond their ability to handle, and that's a common thing. It's a regular thing. But then in that case, they should ask the person who has the degree in quantum physics or in religion and ask them what they think about this really important issue. I've been around the track a few times, and I have in the seminary, I was first in my class in canon law, in moral theology, and church history, and I was really good in all of the theological subjects I took as well. So I'm not exactly a lightweight, and I've been reading for the last 58 years as well. I haven't quit on that job. So the church for 2,000 years has had the job of caring for souls, and it just simply can't stop doing that. Mr. Biden happens to be a politician, and therefore it sounds like it's involving politics, but it's just not. It's not who. It's a matter of what is said. In his campaign, clearly, he was proposing everywhere that he was going to abolish the Hyde Amendment. The Hyde Amendment prohibits the government from spending tax dollars on abortions. Well, if you're going to pay for something, it seems to me that you agree to that. So if he's going to pay for abortions, it seems to me that he must agree with abortions. No spokesman of him who continually speaks for him and says, personally he's against abortion, but in terms of his administration, his hands are tied and all that. And then in that case, he's a very weak person, a person of no character, and he should stand up and say, this is what I believe, and so on. So he's clearly for abortions, 2,500 a day, 930,000 last year. If you tell a lie often enough and with conviction, the people soon begin to believe what you're saying. And you know that is true. The media has been doing that for the last 4 years and finally have admitted to that. And you just can't have both sides of the issue. Mark Twain once said, "It is easy to fool the people, but very difficult to prove and convince the people that they've been fooled." And that's true. It's easy to fool the people, and people have been fooled time and time again. And but to convince them they've been fooled, now that's not an easy thing, because that goes to the ego. Who of us wants to say, "Ooh, I was the first one to be fooled. They sure took me to the cleaners"? Nobody wants to say that. It becomes a matter of one's ego and so on. So. The situation is not a good one in the University of San Francisco, not the University of San Francisco, but the San Francisco School of Medicine. The burgeoning doctors there are doing the heinous practice of harvesting tissues and organs from live babies. Our future doctors being paid by tax dollars from the National Institute of Health. Can you imagine one of your children or grandchildren being used for body parts? So we're talking about a big, big thing here. This is not something that's just off the cuff. And so in a certain way, no one should be allowed to vote for abortion who hasn't seen one. That would certainly be a kind of thing that would change things around, I believe. One of the things that we're talking now about the Catholic Church, and one of the things that just has to be said is from the document Evangelium Vitae, the Gospel of Life, written by Pope St. John Paul II. He says there, and with great authority, he says, and I quote, and I have to read this, otherwise we're again, not exactly dealing with this in a way that deals with ultimates. We have to deal and try to put this to bed with some kind of authority. He says, "Therefore, by the authority which Christ conferred upon Peter and his successors," sounds like he's sitting in the chair of Peter here. "Therefore, by the authority which Christ conferred upon Peter and his successors, in communion with the bishops," another very important thing, "who on various occasions have condemned abortion, and who have, in the aforementioned consultation, albeit dispersed throughout the world, have shown unanimous agreement concerning this doctrine, I declare that direct abortion, that is, abortion willed as an end or as a means, always constitutes a grave moral disorder, since it is the deliberate killing of an innocent human being." This doctrine is based upon the natural law, that law which God has placed in the hearts of men and women to be discovered by reason alone, nothing to do with divine revelation or with religion. This doctrine is based upon the natural law. If we are fully human, we understand this kind of doctrine. And so we have people running around with placards saying, it's my body, and whatever. This is based on natural law. Stop and think. And upon the written word of God. It is transmitted by the church's tradition and taught by the ordinary and universal magisterium. I have had some courses in theology, and boy, this really sounds to me like something that is indeed infallible. Not a thing to muddy the waters at this point, but boy, he's sitting in the chair of Peter, and he's in communion with all the rest of the bishops of the world and saying, this is a unanimous decision that cannot be changed. No circumstance, he says, does St. John Paul II, no circumstance, no purpose, no law whatsoever can ever be made licit, legitimate, moral, an act which is cannot make illicit an act which is intrinsically illicit, since it is contrary to the law of God, which is written in every human heart, natural law, knowable by reason itself, and proclaimed by the church. Strong, very strong words that Mr. Biden and his administration is coming against this. That you have to deal with this. That's what he's dealing with. And he's dealing with the American bishops who, in 2004, in their letter, Catholics in Political Life, have said, we need to do more to persuade all people that human life is precious and human dignity must be defended. This requires more effective dialogue and engagement with all public officials, especially Catholic public officials. Mr. Biden, Pelosi, Cuomo. Catholics need to act in support of these principles and policies in public life. It is the particular vocation of the laity to transform the world. We have to encourage this vocation and do more to bring all believers to this mission. And again, in 1998, in their document, Faithful Citizenship, every voice matters, said the bishops, U.S. bishops. Every voice matters in the public forum. Every vote counts. Every act of responsible citizenship is an exercise of significant individual power. We must exercise that power in ways that defend human life, especially those of God's children who are unborn, disabled, or otherwise vulnerable. The radical left in this country, they haven't become bad. They've become evil in many ways, contradicting things that everybody else is able to discover by the natural law, by the reason, And in some ways, our culture has become, neo-pagan, and that's not a good thing. The bishops have said at another time that fighting against abortion is the preeminent issue, in capital letters, preeminent issue for Catholics. So we're not a one instrument band and just talking about abortion, but that's a really critical thing when you're dealing with paying for 930,000 abortions a year. People who have another mind on this feel really, really, really bad about this. So Mr. Biden, he's going to be dead and gone. And according to St. John Paul, the church isn't going to change its position, and it's really not. And so, it's irrefutable, and so that we have to deal with that. What would be nice would be if Mr. Biden would sit down with Father Frank Pavone, one of the head of the Priests for Life for almost 30 years, and spend an hour talking back and forth in a public forum and try to show him that he's pro-life, or come to understand how, in fact, he isn't pro-life, and therefore to kind of admit that, and then have the church make a decision on where friend Joe fits into the Christian community. We're not talking here about an ordinary meal, are we? Jesus ate with sinners. People say, oh, yeah, of course. And he invited them in, and wonderful. It's a really good thing that he did. And we can do the same thing. And, we do that at shelters and soup kitchens. We invite everybody. We don't ask them about what they believe or whatever. The Catholic Church does that all the time. And spends hundreds of thousands of dollars feeding the poor, millions of dollars literally feeding the poor, and inviting anyone, not asking what they believe or whatever, and that's fine. But we're not dealing with that in this situation. We're dealing with a sacred meal, the Last Supper, which is the sacramental continuation of the Passion, death, and resurrection of Jesus. That's a special meal. It's not just any meal, and it is a meal that shows that all of the believers that are gathered in that place have a sense of unity, a communion, a community, a union with each other in all things. And then we eat at the same table of the Lord, So the Eucharist is not just a cause of unity, it is also a sign of unity. That happens typically with family meals, or when you invite people in, you don't invite in your enemies or someone's going to attack you. You invite in your friends. Come, when people come to your house, what do you say? Do you want something to eat? Would you like a drink? Eating with someone is a sign of unity. It's a sign of communion. And in this particular case, it's a serious sign of unity and communion. That's what the Eucharist is all about. I was first in my class in church history. In the year 155, Antoninus Pius, a pagan emperor, asked St. Justin, what do you Christians do on a Sunday? This is about 120, 130 years after Jesus has died. And he explains what Christians do on that Sunday and sends his letter to Apollinus Pius. And one of the things he says, in the year 55, listen, so we've got some precedent for this. I know that's a long way back, and things change. And I know that in doctrine can develop. I know all of that too. But St. Justin says to the emperor, because this bread and wine have been made Eucharist, they called it Eucharisted, according to an ancient expression, we call this food Eucharist. And no one may take part in it unless he believes that what we teach is true, has received baptism for the forgiveness of sins and a new birth, and lives in keeping with what Christ taught. So this isn't something new. The year 155, is from the Catechism of the Catholic Church, a pretty big book that really refers to a lot of things in religion that, again, people have a sixth grade knowledge of, very little of it. It's a big, thick book. A lot of things in there that need to be reflected on and prayed on in order to be able to make intelligent, reasonable, religious decisions that have backing and understanding in the field of theology. Not an easy thing to do. So I cannot judge Mr. Biden's conscience. Conscience is inviolable. It is the ultimate, the final arbiter of right and wrong is one's personal conscience. And so only Mr. Biden and God have a right to that place inside of him. No one else. So I don't know what his conscience is, and I'm not judging his conscience. He can be perfectly fine in his conscience. I have no idea about that, and I'm not trying to enter into that particular place where no one has a right to go except Mr. Biden and God. So we're not doing that. I hope that this has been of some kind of help in having you to be able to understand all of the things that are happening in our culture. When I think about abortion in general, I think of all of the things that I see, the signs at the Capitol with people, it's my body and so on. And over the years, I've written down a few things that might be worth sharing at this point. Abortion, I used to say often in my talks, doesn't make you unpregnant. It makes you the parent of a dead child. That's what abortion does. My body, my choice, I see it everywhere. That's okay if you're aborting yourself. Picture of a dog, kill him, equals cruelty. Picture of a fetus, kill him, and it equals choice. Whew. What's the difference there? The most dangerous place for an African American baby is in the womb. What an irony it should be that we live in a society that places aborted babies in plastic bags and should be more concerned about recycling the plastic bags. Eagle's egg, destroy it. $250,000 fine and up to 2 years in jail. Fetus, destroy it. No fine, no jail, all legal. I don't want abortion to be illegal. I want it to be just unthinkable. Abortion is to health care like the showers at Auschwitz were to hygiene. Think about that. Planned Unparenthood says it prevents unwanted pregnancies. Then why does the abortion giant make so much doing it? And not only that, but selling baby body parts for money. Big, big money. Pregnancy. This is from Mira Shah, the chief medical officer for Planned Parenthood of northern New York City suburbs. Couldn't believe it when I read it. She said, quote, pregnancy-related care, especially abortion care, is essential and life-affirming. How does abortion become life-affirming? It's absolutely incredible. The Biden administration now allows home-delivered abortion kits. For $250, you can have an abortion in your own bedroom. The kit comes with tea bags and mints. $250. He's allowing this, his administration. We taxpayers are paying for it. So try to rethink this whole thing and pray on it. Really reflect on what does God want in this whole thing, and we have to bring him into this. This is life. What would Jesus do? Well, I'm planting a soul in this baby. Now you can destroy that. That makes no sense at all, and we can't live with that kind of understanding of reality. Finally, this is not a time for compromise. It's a time to present what we believe and think clearly, share the truth without any kind of hesitation. The bishops, I hope, aren't going to just create another document, have them all sign it, and they can all hide behind the signatures of 200 and some bishops, and the document will be put on a shelf somewhere and read by almost nobody. It's a time for them to clearly come out and speak clearly exactly what they're thinking so that everybody, without any mistake, knows exactly where they stand. Not putting it on a shelf, not hiding behind all of the other bishops. And I believe they need to, each of them personally in their own dioceses, need to come out with a letter that is read in every parish in the country on a given Sunday and sign that letter to show that I am completely responsible for this letter, and not kind of blaming all of the other bishops, which is that corporate entity that nobody can blame. And so I think that's something that is really important. Another final thought is that, is Joe Biden, is Mr. Biden, President Biden, a Christian? Well, he is. If he still believes in Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, he's a Christian. Is he a Catholic Christian? I don't think so, because he's denying an absolutely fundamental moral aspect of that religion, and I just don't think there's any way that you can say that he is any longer a Catholic Christian. Am I to judge that? No, that's for him to decide, but one of the two is true. And one of the two has to be handled by him, whether he wants to be simply a Christian and whether he is because he believes in Jesus as Lord and Savior, or if he wants to be a Catholic Christian and handle those words that were really very apodictic words from St. John Paul II. Our whole country, if we want to be happy tomorrow, it's always essential to do the truth today. It's not so much the things that hurt you, but the things that ain't so. Will Rogers, there's no right way to do the wrong thing. There's no right way. to do the wrong thing, and there's no kind of intellectual gymnastics, especially of people who are not qualified to do those intellectual gymnastics, that will allow it to become something that is okay. This is not a small issue, something for the streets, but it's for people who have all kinds of intellectual and scholarship background to really deal with. And so I hope that today has been something of a help for you in trying to make up your decision personally on the things that are happening in our culture, not just now, but this is going to continue in one way or another until we really hopefully get it right for the last time. Good to be with you always. God bless. Bill Pfeiffer speaking. Keep me in your prayers. Know that you're always in mine.